Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into one of the absolute sharpest, most fascinating geopolitical pressure points in the entire Mediterranean. We're unlocking the story of Ceuta, a place where ancient history literally hardens into modern borders, and a tiny patch of land holds centuries of unfinished business. Just think about this geographical paradox for a second. We've got a Spanish city, entirely governed by European law, but it's sitting squarely on the North African coast, completely boxed in by Morocco. So how on earth does a fortified European frontier end up essentially floating on the African continent? To figure out this anomaly, here's our roadmap for today. Europe's African border, fastening the gateway, a fabric of four faiths, the live mechanism, and finally, Europe's external edge. All right, let's get into it.
Starting off with Part 1, Europe's African border, a geographic anomaly.
Well, it really comes down to the Strait of Gibraltar being incredibly narrow. We're talking less than 10 miles wide at its tightest point. Because of that, military planners, ancient sailors, and sprawling empires have literally always viewed Ceuta as a vital gate. The nearby heights, which you might know as the mythic Pillars of Hercules to the ancient Greeks and Romans, represent a strategic hinge of the world. Historically, whoever controlled these heights could watch, tax, stop, or totally redirect global shipping moving between the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. And you can imagine this tiny 10-mile stretch creates some massive geopolitical friction today, right? We're looking at two completely opposite claims over the exact same piece of geography. On one hand, Spain views Ceuta as an integral part of the Spanish state, governed by European law. But on the flip side, Morocco sees the city as an unresolved colonial remnant, a contested piece of African territory. We're looking at this strictly through the lens of history and geography today to really wrap our heads around both of these distinct viewpoints. Which brings us to Section 2, Fastening the Gateway, and the layers of rule over the centuries. You see, Ceuta absolutely wasn't always Spanish. Back in antiquity, the Romans called it Septem Fratries. Fast forward a bit, and Islamic dynasties used it as a crucial bridge connecting North Africa to Iberia. But the real game changer happened in 1415. That's when a Portuguese conquest flipped the script. Later, during the 1580 Iberian Union, Ceuta got pulled into the Spanish orbit. And when Portugal eventually left that union, Ceuta actually chose to remain with Spain, a decision formalized in 1668. And here's the thing you have to understand, that 1415 conquest wasn't just another run-of-the-mill military victory. The sources actually describe it as a territorial fastening. Basically, a European crown physically bolted itself onto the North African coast, converting a highly strategic location into a permanent sovereign claim. That fastening is exactly what created the complex modern map we're looking at today. All right, moving on to Section 3, a fabric of four faiths. Let's look at the working city itself. Stepping away from the maps and empires for a second, let's talk about the actual people walking these streets today. Back in 1863, the Spanish government made a huge pivot. They transitioned Ceuta from a closed-off penal colony into an open free port. And wow, did that revitalize the local economy. It essentially turned the city into a massive, bustling hub for international trade. That economic boom was like a magnet drawing in merchants from all over the globe. Most notably, a vibrant Hindu community arrived in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, jumping into the textile and electronics trade. And today, they proudly stand alongside Christians, Muslims, and Jews as the four pillars of Ceuta's shared social fabric. You can literally see this pluralism in the architecture, with churches, mosques, and synagogues sharing the exact same urban landscape. Because of this, the city has an absolutely incredibly rich linguistic tapestry. I mean, Spanish is the official language, sure, but walk through the markets and you'll hear various Arabic dialects filling the air, along with a whole mix of diverse merchant languages. It's fascinating because despite all that underlying geopolitical tension we talked about, everyday folks from these four faiths actually live, work, and trade together in this integrated working city, which relies heavily on daily cross-border movement. Now let's get into Section 4, the live mechanism. We're looking at the geopolitics right at the border. So how does this border actually function on a day-to-day basis? Well, the sources call it a live mechanism operating under what they term managed tension. It's basically a three-step playbook. Step 1, a diplomatic dispute flares up over regional interests, say Western Sahara. Step 2, Morocco decides to signal its political displeasure by just relaxing its border policing. And Step 3, boom, migration pressure immediately slams right into Europe's external edge. To put that into perspective, the sheer scale of this tension totally exploded into public view back in May 2021. After a diplomatic freeze between Madrid and Rabat, a staggering 8,000 people crossed into Ceuta in literally just a matter of days. 8,000! It was this stark, undeniable demonstration of how a local frontier can instantly turn into a massive site of international pressure. And why does this matter to you and me? Because these high-level diplomatic games have immediate physical consequences on real people's livelihoods on both sides of defense. When tensions spike and that border tightens up, cross-border movement just grinds to a halt. We're talking supply chains breaking down, jobs disappearing overnight, and food prices spiking. This managed tension isn't just theory, it's an economic lever that dictates daily survival for thousands. Which brings us to our final part, Section 5, Europe's external edge, and funding the frontier. Since Ceuta is essentially the external edge of the European Union sitting in Africa, Brussels obviously treats it as a top priority. They pump direct funding into a massively reinforced perimeter. We're talking high-tech fences, complex camera systems, patrol roads, the whole shebang. It is a textbook example of the EU's externalized border control strategy, meaning they try to manage and screen migration far away from the European mainland. And when a surge happens, like that one in 2021, the EU doesn't just see it as a Spanish problem. They treat it as a collective, EU-wide crisis. But here is where we hit a really glaring contradiction. The EU can throw all the money, funding, and cameras they want at this border, but they fundamentally cannot change geography. Ceuta is still physically in Africa. And what that means is daily border stability relies almost entirely on the cooperation of Morocco, a non-EU neighbor. This is where history quite literally hardens into concrete and metal. The modern border fences at Ceuta today, they're just the latest layer in a super long line of defensive walls built over millennia. As the sources put it so perfectly, they put centuries of unfinished imperial business on full public display. Every camera, every stretch of fence, every diplomatic freeze, it's all just a continuation of a story that started long before modern Spain or Morocco even existed on a map. So, as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to really ponder. Ceuta sits right at this intense collision point of international law, daily survival, and competing states. So, how long can this fortified intersection realistically manage the deep friction between international law and its own unchangeable geography? It's a huge question. Thanks so much for exploring this with me. Keep an eye on those maps, and I'll catch you in the next one.